Hello and welcome to the CDAO magazine interview series. I'm Jake Dreier with Hilabs, and we are partnering with CDAO magazine and MIT CDAO IQ and the International Society of Chief Data Officers in an interview series. Today, I have the pleasure of speaking with Zoher Karu, who is the Chief Data and Analytics Officer at Blueshield of California. Zoher, welcome.
Thank you, Jake.
So Zoher, why don't we start just you sharing a little bit about yourself, your background, and what it means for you to be the Chief Data and Analytics Officer at Blueshield.
Absolutely. So this is actually my first venture into the world of healthcare, and I'm relatively new at Blueshield, California, coming up on 4.5 months or so. My background is varied across a few different industries. So education-wise, I actually did a PhD in electrical engineering and computer science. I did biomedical research. I was working on getting paralyzed people walking. I studied human hearing through image processing. And after all of that, I actually never used it. I went straight to McKinsey & Company. I did consulting for several years. I worked at several smaller startups, doing some interesting things like tracking customers inside of retail stores like Best Buy and CVS and Walgreens, like where you walk and where you shop. I was using video cameras on the ceiling. I also worked in a company that did a lot of voice analytics, particularly around call centers, understanding which agents are better than other agents, what are topics cause customers to be upset, what are the subjects of the conversations, et cetera. So quite fascinating, and using that as a source of data as well. And then some bigger company experience. Sears Holdings, the retailer, who launched, at the time I was there, the largest loyalty card program in the country, so a lot of monetization around that data. I worked for eBay doing data and analytics globally. And then most recently, I was in Citibank, where I was actually based in Singapore, doing data and analytics across 17 different countries in Asia and Europe. And now back in the South Bay in California. So excited to be here. I would say, some of the reasons I came to Blueshield, California, one, clearly a lot of data, challenging to organize it all, but definitely a lot of data. Two, the mission, the appeal of wanting to use data and analytics for the mission of improving people's lives, I think is a worthy one, and one I wanted to be a part of. And then finally, three, I get the real sense from Paul Markovich and our CEO on down that they really want to make a dent in transforming the world of healthcare. And it's a complicated animal for sure, but I wanted to be a part of it. And honestly, if this was more of a status quo or a steady state job, I don't think I would have come, but the opportunity to help try to make a change is what was part of the attraction for me.
Thank you. And I think what's really interesting and compelling about your experience is how many leadership roles you have had regarding data across multiple sectors. And so I think with that question in mind, data tends to be very quantitative, and the issue of leadership often tends to be very qualitative. And so, especially given the range of your experience, I'd love to hear your thoughts on what it means to actually combine the two, the quantitative nature of data analytics and the qualitative nature of leadership in general.
Yeah, so I would say that the ability to have success in the world of data and analytics, the technical side is what I'll call necessary, but not sufficient. Meaning, yes, you need to understand it, but just because you're have a technical spike, you may not be able to succeed kind of in a cross-functional corporate environment. And that is because it's not just about the algorithms. It really is about understanding what drives the business and really working from that business backwards to be that partner with various parts of the business and accelerate outcomes. I always tell my team that the success will come from, or your job actually consists of three big parts. One, of course, you have to solve the problem and do the analytics, but you also have to be able to communicate very clearly in a way that people can understand you. And the third is change management, because people, didn't have these big fancy data analytics teams, many years ago, yet these companies were doing just fine. So now you're asking them to come in and use data and use analytics in a way that they may or may not have done before. And there is a change management aspect to that, and you can't lose sight of that. And you have to have that, deep understanding of putting yourself in their shoes, understanding what their goals are, and kind of working backwards from there, as opposed to, I have this fancy algorithm, why aren't you using it, right? And you really need to go backwards from that. So I think that those softer factors are critical to success.
You just mentioned change management. I'd love to hear a little bit about your experience in driving workforce transformation. So would love to hear you talk about what are the ways that you and your team are working within Blue Cross Blue Shield to drive change management, and what are the tools that you're currently using within the organization?
We are set up at Blue Shield as a centralized team across data and analytics that interfaces with all the different stakeholders in the company. We kind of own the stack of data engineering, which manipulates and organizes the data, to analytics, to data science, to visualization. And so we are set up to work across that stack, across all of the different stakeholders. And my team, the way I've organized it, is what I'll call verticals and horizontals. So verticals mean people dedicated to different lines of the business or parts of the business. So you're dedicated to network, and you're dedicated to marketing, and you're dedicated to operations, and you're et cetera, et cetera. And then horizontals, which are capabilities like predictive modeling or visualization or data asset creation or compliance and privacy or other things that you can apply to these different parts of the business, right? And so the way that we are really driving change or is, one, using those verticals to embed ourselves in these different parts of the organization. And I've done this at roles in the past where we are basically, attending the staff meetings of senior leaders across the company because we want to be embedded in that team. We want to understand what's going on, understand the problems, as opposed to they write down what they want and throw it over the fence, right? And that usually doesn't work. It's really about being as part of that, doing the business problem solving. And really just, it's goal setting season, for example, right now. My team is asking me what my goals are. I usually respond with, who is your stakeholder and what are their goals? Because, and their goals are your goals. And it's pretty simple, right? And because you're there to help accelerate outcomes and be that partner one of the biggest challenges in the world of data analytics is there's so many places that you can have an impact. The real challenge is prioritization and to really think through what's going to matter the most. And if you don't have that business lens to yourself, you will have a very hard time prioritizing. You may be working on an interesting analytics problem, but it may not matter, right? And so how do you really think about what matters to the business stakeholders and work backwards from that? So so the change management is really thinking about the portfolio stakeholders, the things they're trying to get done, and really trying to at least get an entry point. Not every stakeholder is equally open to immediate change, but you find the areas that are, you de-risk it to the point that we want to try something differently. You show them the results of doing that thing differently, and usually things snowball from there. And so that is an approach that I've used in a few different places.
Got it. Thank you. And it's interesting. You mentioned in your response stakeholders in regards to data. And I think what is unique about healthcare is some of the biggest stakeholders are actually patients.
Yep.
And so I'd love to hear from you, especially when we're talking about big data and big data analytics tools, which includes AI and machine learning. It's not limited to that. There are other tools for big data. But I'd love to hear, what are the ways that you are using innovative technologies to improve and enrich the patients and the patient member experience?
So certainly, as you said, there's a wide variety of kind of tools out there, and the tools keep changing on a regular basis. I think the fundamental philosophy and grounding principle is around understanding individuals at the individual level, right? And to integrate that data together from multiple sources. We at Blue Shield are building what we're calling the experience cube, single view of, where everybody can have access to the same data, the payers, the providers, the members. It's all the problem that I've observed in healthcare is there's a lot of disconnected sets of data, right? And your doctor has one view of you, and the hospital might have a different view of you, and et cetera. And so if you change insurance companies, then those things may or may not talk to each other, right? And so that getting that data together, understanding the members at the individual level is a key part of success, right? And to be able to really think through what I can do to understand at the individual level and then be able to act at the individual level, right? And so the philosophy that I use is variability is opportunity. Not every member is the same. So if you can understand those differences, you can act on those differences, especially in a digital world, right? Personalized communications, understanding different things around what experience to give them when they call the call center, or et cetera, right? And so that integrating that data together, creating that single view, and then acting on that single view is critical, because that solving for the average is not necessarily the best answer. It'll get you better than maybe where you were, but looking for those individual pockets of opportunity and really being able to deliver at that level, I think is critical. And, honestly, consumer expectations have been rising. I mean, if you look at this 20 years ago, people would say, okay, the company doesn't really know me, that's okay. But now, in the age of ordering a pizza from your couch with one click of your button on your phone, you have expectations of what companies should be able to do and the way you interact with each other. And that, I think, is critical to be able to deliver that high level of experience to individuals. And so that's what it really boils down to me, more so than any sort of specific tool or technology. Once you have that understanding, you can do lots of interesting things around predicting models, like who's likely to need to visit the specialist, or who's likely to, move states, or who's likely to do whatever, right? But you can't do any of those things without a firm understanding of individuals. So.
One thing I really appreciated about your response was the emphasis on synthesizing and integrating data to provide insight and make it actionable for the individual member. And in that context, it's very easy for the mind to go to value-based care, which is especially an important issue in healthcare right now. Yeah. And in this environment, those actionable insights require health plan and providers communicating together in order to ensure the best patient outcomes for members. And so I'd love to hear your insight. Is there a way that plans can approach this issue of data quality and data insight in their coordination with providers?
So look, it really is about data ecosystems, right? And to recognize that 1 + 1 can be 3 if you bring this stuff together. Just to pick a different example from a different area, imagine if the farmers shared data with the grocery stores. Both would likely benefit. It's probably not happening as well as it could today, right? But if they could, then you could imagine both benefiting. Just like if everybody in the healthcare ecosystem, from providers to payers to the members to pharma, was sharing data more effectively with each other, I think everybody would benefit. And therefore, one of the keys, of course, is single source of truth. You can't have different versions of Zoher floating around. That will create confusions, right? And so having a single source of truth, having the data updated at the velocity that people expect it to be updated. So, I just visited the doctor. I called the call center a few hours later. Do they actually know that I just went to the doctor? Yes or no, right? And so is the data flowing around in a single source of truth, like the experience queue we are building, and updated at high velocity, near real time, basically, right? Would be ideal. And so I think, with technology platforms like cloud, it makes data integration much easier. It makes the frequency of update much more possible. And so that is kind of the key, I think, to unlocking a lot of this experience. Because at the end of the day, what is the purpose of data and analytics. It is to deliver a better customer experience. That's the objective, right? And so you can't do that without a complete understanding of, the customer. And that's, I think, the basis of a lot of this.
Zoher, thank you so much for joining us today. Your data insight and perspective is really valuable. You've given me a lot of different ways to think about this, and I'm sure you have for the listeners as well. And so for the listeners, please visit cdomagazine.tech for any additional interviews you'd like to watch. But most importantly, Zoher, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Jake. I appreciate it.